So what I want to do for the second part of the tutorial is let the animation play out for a few complete cycles at real speed, and then what we're going to do is slow it down, and we can run things frame by frame. We can move forward frame by frame if we want, and we can also retract frames so we can really understand what's going on with these components. So here I'm going to let it run. You'll see the cylinder extend and retract and extend again and retract. And notice it's not just the cylinder that's moving. The gauges are moving, the directional valve's moving, the pump's moving, the relief valve's moving. There's a lot going on there in this simple circuit. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good idea of how it all works, but now let's look at it in detail. So when we start here, what we see is we've got a spool that's in the center position, pressure is blocked right here, and we see our relief valves open, right? Our relief valve here, the poppet's off the land, allowing a flow path from 1 to 2. So now I'm going to advance it, and there at that point this spool shifted to the left, and that's when things start to get interesting. So now you've got an alternate flow path for the pump to move oil to. Instead of just going over the relief valve, now it's going to fill this void across our directional valve spool, and flow is going to start to head into the A port, out of the A port of the directional valve into the piston end of the cylinder. So now I will advance it again, and you see at this point between those last two frames the relief valve closed off. So now the pressure here, it's easier. The fluid takes the path of least resistance, which in this case is into the piston end of the cylinder. So at this point, what do we want to look at? Well, for one, the red is indicative of the higher pressure. Blue is indicative of the lower pressure, and there are varying colors in between that represent the intermediate pressures. But at this point, this cylinder here is going to start to extend because we've got pressure going into the piston end. We've got a pilot pressure here, and it doesn't look like our counterbalance valve has shifted yet because we still have high pressure on the rod end. But if I advance it another frame, there, at that point you could see it shift. So between those last two frames, if we look at the counterbalance valve, we'll go back and forward, back and forward. So that opens up this flow path between 1 and 2. So we've got flow going from P to A into the piston end of the cylinder. We've got flow trying to come out of the rod end of the cylinder. Now it's got a path over the counterbalance valve from 1 to 2, and now it can go into port B and ultimately to tank. So we've got a complete circuit. So I'll let it play a few frames here, and that's more of a steady state type position at that point as it approaches the end of travel. And I'll run it a couple more frames, and when it gets to end of travel, you're going to see a pressure spike here, because all of a sudden what was a wide open flow path is going to shut off because our actuator or cylinder is at end of stroke. So right there, you saw the gauge kind of peg up right there. So at that point, what's going on, we still have our directional valve shifted. So P is ported to A here, and we still have a pilot pressure at our counterbalance valve, so that's still open for the moment. Now, another interesting thing between those last two frames is we see our relief valve open back up again. So I'll go back a frame, and you see the relief valve was closed when things were moving along, and then I advance it, it opens up again. So I'll go back again and advance, back and advance, so you can see that relief valve opening up, because now all of a sudden the only way this pump can relieve itself is to elevate its pressure to the setting of this relief valve and go to tank.